They thought I was a pawn. But this is my game.
"He's just a warehouse worker," my wife's father told his business partners, his voice dripping with disdain as he gestured toward me with his brandy snifter. Rebecca's sister Emma smirked from across the mahogany-paneled study, her perfectly manicured fingers wrapped around a martini glass. "So embarrassing for the family reputation," I smiled silently, nursing my beer while they continued their little performance. The irony was delicious. Here I was, standing in their precious mansion, listening to them tear me apart like vultures picking at roadkill, while the evening news played softly on the massive flat-screen television mounted above their fireplace. "In breaking business news tonight," the anchor's voice cut through their conversation, "the tech world is buzzing about the mysterious new CEO of Dataflow Industries, the billion-dollar company that's been operating under complete secrecy for the past 5 years. Sources confirm the company has just secured the largest government contract in cybersecurity history, worth an estimated $3 billion over the next decade." My smile widened as Rebecca's father paused mid-sentence, his attention drawn to the screen. Emma's smirk faltered slightly as she too turned toward the television. "The identity of Dataflow's CEO has been one of Silicon Valley's best-kept secrets," the reporter continued, "but sources close to the company suggest the reveal is coming soon. What we do know is that this individual has built an empire from nothing, revolutionizing data security while maintaining complete anonymity." I took another sip of my beer, savoring the moment. If only they knew that the embarrassing warehouse worker standing in their living room was the very man the business world had been trying to unmask for years. But that revelation would have to wait. I had bigger problems to deal with first. Rebecca walked into the room, her blonde hair perfectly styled, wearing a designer dress that probably cost more than most people made in a month. She barely glanced at me before joining her family's conversation about suitable social circles and maintaining appearances. Her coldness toward me had been growing for months, and tonight it was particularly sharp. "David, darling," her father addressed me with barely concealed contempt, "perhaps you could enlighten us about your career prospects. Surely you don't intend to work in that warehouse forever." I set down my beer and met his gaze steadily. "Actually, Charles, I find the work quite fulfilling. There's something to be said for honest labor," Emma snorted. "Honest labor doesn't pay for private schools or country club memberships. Rebecca deserves better than living paycheck to paycheck." "We're hardly living paycheck to paycheck," I replied calmly, though inside I was calculating exactly how many paychecks it would take Charles to earn what I made in a single day. Rebecca finally looked at me, her green eyes cold as winter. "David's right, Emma. We manage just fine." Her tone suggested otherwise, and the way she said manage made it sound like we were barely scraping by. The truth was, I'd been playing this role for so long that sometimes I almost forgot who I really was. 5 years ago, when I met Rebecca at a coffee shop near the warehouse district, I was already worth more money than her entire family combined. But I was also tired of women who only saw dollar signs when they looked at me. Rebecca had seemed different then, warm, genuine, interested in me as a person rather than a bank account. How wrong I'd been. "Well," Charles continued, swirling his brandy, "I suppose someone has to do the menial jobs. Just seems a shame that Rebecca has to suffer for it." "Suffer?" I raised an eyebrow. "She drives a BMW, lives in a beautiful home, and wants for nothing. If that's suffering, sign me up for more of it." "A beautiful home in the wrong neighborhood," Emma interjected, "and a BMW that's 3 years old." I was about to respond when Rebecca's phone buzzed. She glanced at it quickly, and I caught a flash of something in her expression, guilt maybe, or excitement. She quickly tucked the phone away, but not before I noticed her fingers trembling slightly. "Everything all right?" I asked. "Just work," she replied too quickly. "You know how it is." But I did know how it was, and Rebecca's marketing job at Morrison & Associates didn't typically require her attention at 9 o'clock on a Saturday night, especially not the kind of attention that made her cheeks flush and her hands shake. The conversation moved on to other topics. Charles's latest business venture, Emma's promotion at her law firm, the upcoming charity gala that Rebecca and I apparently weren't important enough to attend. I half listened, my mind now focused on that phone buzz and Rebecca's reaction to it. Over the past few months, there had been other signs. Late nights at the office that seemed to happen more and more frequently. mysterious phone calls that ended abruptly when I entered the room, a new gym membership that she claimed was for stress relief, though she never seemed particularly relaxed after her workouts. And then there was Travis. Travis Kellerman worked security at Morrison & Associates, and according to Rebecca, he was just a colleague. But colleagues don't usually warrant detailed descriptions of their workout routines or their interesting perspectives on life. Colleagues don't typically inspire new interest in protein shakes and athletic wear. I'd met Travis once, briefly, at Rebecca's company Christmas party. He was everything I appeared not to be: flashy, loud, obviously wealthy, with the kind of gym-sculpted physique that suggested he spent more time looking in mirrors than reading books. He'd shaken my hand with the grip of someone trying to prove something, his eyes already dismissing me as irrelevant. "So you're the warehouse guy," he'd said with a grin that didn't reach his eyes. "Rebecca's told me all about you." I'd smiled back, matching his grip with interest. "Funny, she's never mentioned you at all." His grin had faltered slightly, but he'd recovered quickly. "Well, we work together. Different worlds, you know?" Different worlds indeed. Now, watching Rebecca check her phone again when she thought no one was looking, I realized those worlds might be colliding sooner than anyone expected. The evening dragged on with more subtle insults and not so subtle suggestions that Rebecca could do better. I endured it all with the patience of someone who knew that patience was about to pay off in ways they couldn't imagine. Finally, mercifully, Rebecca announced that we should head home. The ride back to our house was quiet, tension filling the car like fog. "Your family was particularly charming tonight," I said as we pulled into our driveway. Rebecca sighed. "They mean well, David. They just want what's best for me. And what's best for you apparently doesn't include your husband." She didn't answer, which was answer enough. Inside our house, a modest but comfortable place that I'd bought with cash under a shell company, Rebecca immediately headed for the shower. Her phone, left on the kitchen counter, buzzed again. I glanced at it. A text from T that read, "Can't wait to see you Monday. Same place?" My chill ran down my spine, but my mind remained clear. So it was true. Rebecca, my wife of 3 years, the woman I'd loved enough to hide my true identity from, was having an affair with a security guard who probably made less in a year than I spent on coffee. The irony was almost too perfect to be real. I heard the shower running upstairs and made a decision. It was time to stop being the humble warehouse worker and start being the man who'd built a billion-dollar empire from nothing. But I wouldn't reveal my hand all at once. No, this required strategy, patience, and a level of ruthless planning that had made me successful in business. Rebecca wanted to play games? Fine. But she was about to learn that she'd been playing checkers while married to a chess grandmaster. I picked up my own phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found Rico Martinez, my old friend who owned a boxing gym downtown. Rico was one of the few people who knew my real identity, and more importantly, he was someone I trusted completely. "Rico," I said when he answered. "It's David. I need a favor." "What's up, hermano?" "I need you to keep your ears open at the gym. There's a guy named Travis Kellerman who might work out there. Mid-30s, works security, drives a red Mustang. I need to know everything about him." Rico was quiet for a moment. "This about Rebecca?" "Yeah. Say no more. I'll put out some feelers." After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen, listening to the water running upstairs and planning my next moves. Rebecca thought she was married to a simple warehouse worker who would never suspect her infidelity, let alone do anything about it. Travis thought he was stealing another man's wife without consequences. They were both about to learn how wrong they were. The shower stopped, and I heard Rebecca moving around upstairs. When she came down, she was wearing a silk nightgown that she hadn't worn for me in months. "You seem tense," she said, though her voice lacked any real concern. "Just thinking about work," I replied. "You know how it is." She nodded absently, already reaching for her phone to check for new messages. "Rebecca," I said softly. She looked up, and for just a moment I saw a flicker of the woman I'd fallen in love with. The woman who used to laugh at my jokes and curl up next to me on Sunday mornings. The woman who'd promised to love me for better or worse, richer or poorer. "Yes?" I smiled, and this time it wasn't the patient, long-suffering smile I'd been wearing all evening. This was something else entirely, something that made her take a small step backward. "Nothing," I said. "Just wanted to tell you that I love you." She relaxed slightly. "I love you too." But we both knew she was lying. Monday morning arrived gray and cold, typical for our Rust Belt city in late October. I drove my beat-up Ford pickup to the warehouse, same as I had every weekday for the past 5 years. To anyone watching, I was just David Sullivan, regular working guy, heading to another day of moving boxes and operating forklifts. The warehouse was my perfect cover. I'd bought the company through a series of shell corporations, then hired myself as a regular employee. My boss was actually one of my lawyers, and my coworkers were some of the most loyal people I'd ever met. They knew I was more than I appeared to be, but they didn't ask questions, and I didn't volunteer information. "Morning, Dave," called out Pete Kowalski, a 50-something guy who'd worked warehouses his entire life. "You look like heck." "Thanks, Pete. Your wife say the same thing to you this morning?" He laughed, a sound that echoed off the concrete walls. "Every morning for 32 years. I grabbed my work gloves and headed to my station. But my mind was elsewhere. While my hands went through the familiar motions of checking inventory and organizing shipments, I was planning the systematic destruction of my wife's affair. Around 10 o'clock, my phone buzzed with a text from Rico. "Found your guy. He's here now. Loudmouth, likes to brag. Come by after work if you can." Perfect. The day dragged by with agonizing slowness. Every hour felt like 10, and I found myself checking the clock constantly. My coworkers noticed my distraction. "You all right, Dave?" asked Maria Santos, the warehouse supervisor. "You seem off today." "Just some personal stuff," I replied, hefting a box onto a shelf. "Nothing I can't handle." "Well, if you need to talk, you know where to find me." Maria was good people, tough as nails, but with a heart of gold. She'd grown up in the same neighborhood as me, back when I was actually poor instead of just pretending to be. She was one of the few people who remembered the real David Sullivan, before the money and the success and the lies. At 5 o'clock sharp, I clocked out and drove straight to Rico's gym. The place was exactly what you'd expect from a boxing gym in the warehouse district. Concrete floors, exposed pipes, heavy bags hanging from chains, and the constant smell of sweat and determination. Rico was behind the front desk, a mountain of a man with graying hair and hands like sledgehammers. He'd been a professional boxer once back in the day, before a knee injury ended his career and led him to open this place. "Dave," he said, standing to give me a bear hug. "Been too long, hermano." "I know. I've been meaning to get back in here." "Sure you have?" He grinned. "Come on, let's talk in my office." Rico's office was a small room behind the main gym floor, filled with boxing memorabilia and photos of fighters he'd trained. He closed the door and gestured for me to sit. "So, about your boy Travis," he began, settling into his chair. "He's been coming here for about 6 months. Real peacock, you know? Always talking about his car, his job, his conquests." "Conquests?" "Yeah, he likes to brag about the women he's seeing. Married women, specifically. Says he's got a thing for taking other men's wives." My jaw clenched involuntarily. "What else?" "He works security at some big marketing company downtown. Morrison something. Makes decent money, but spends it like he's making twice as much. Always picking up checks, buying rounds, trying to impress people." "Has he mentioned anyone specific recently?" Rico's expression grew serious. "Yeah, actually. There's this blonde he's been talking about for the past couple months. Says she's married to some loser who works in a warehouse. Claims she's embarrassed by her husband. Wants to upgrade to a real man." The words hit me like physical blows, but I kept my expression neutral. "Anything else?" "He's supposed to meet her today, actually. Kept talking about it all morning. Some motel out on Route 9. I knew Route 9 well. It was a strip of cheap motels and fast food restaurants about 20 minutes from downtown. The perfect place for a secret affair. "Rico, I need another favor." "Name it." "I need you to keep listening. Find out everything you can about his routine, his habits, his weaknesses, and if he mentions my wife again..." I paused, trying to control my anger. "Just let me know what he says." Rico studied my face for a long moment. "You sure you want to go down this road, Dave? Sometimes it's better not to know." "I already know. Now I need to decide what to do about it." He nodded slowly. "All right, but be careful. Guys like Travis, they don't fight fair when they're cornered." I left the gym with my mind racing. Part of me wanted to drive straight to Route 9 and confront them both. But that would be emotional, messy, and ultimately counterproductive. I needed to be smarter than that. Instead, I drove home and waited. Rebecca returned around 7:30, later than usual, but not suspiciously so. She looked flushed and slightly disheveled, her hair not quite as perfect as it had been that morning. "How was work?" I asked from the kitchen, where I was pretending to read a magazine. "Busy," she replied, not meeting my eyes. "Lots of meetings. I'm exhausted." I bet you are. She looked at me sharply, as if trying to detect sarcasm in my tone, but I kept my expression neutral. I'm going to take a shower, she announced. Good idea. While she was upstairs, I made a decision. It was time to start gathering evidence, and I knew exactly how to do it without breaking any laws or stooping to Travis's level. I opened my laptop and accessed one of my legitimate businesses, a private investigation firm I'd acquired 2 years ago. Within minutes, I had a team of professionals on standby, ready to document Rebecca's activities with the kind of thoroughness that would hold up in any court of law. But more than that, I began to formulate a plan that would destroy both Rebecca and Travis in ways they never saw coming. It wouldn't be quick, and it wouldn't be simple, but it would be absolutely devastating. The next morning, I kissed Rebecca goodbye and watched her drive away in her BMW, knowing she was heading to another day of lies and betrayal. But for the first time in months, I was smiling. She thought she was playing me for a fool. What she didn't realize was that she'd just declared war on someone who'd built an empire by outthinking, outmaneuvering, and ultimately destroying his competition. And in this war, I held all the advantages. 3 weeks of surveillance had given me everything I needed. Photos, timestamps, credit card records, phone logs, a complete picture of Rebecca's affair painted in excruciating detail. But more importantly, I'd learned something that changed everything. Rebecca's best friend, Maya Chen, a lawyer at a prestigious downtown firm, had been coaching her through the entire affair. Maya and I had history. 5 years ago, when I was first building my legitimate business empire, she'd applied for a position as corporate counsel. On paper, she was perfect. Harvard Law, excellent references, impressive track record. But during her interview, I'd sensed something calculating and cold beneath her professional exterior. When I'd chosen someone else, she'd accused me of discrimination and threatened a lawsuit that never materialized. Now she was back in my life, manipulating my wife toward divorce while positioning herself to profit from the legal fees. It was almost admirable in its cunning, except for the fact that it was destroying my marriage. I was contemplating this irony when my phone rang. Rico's name appeared on the screen. Dave, you need to get down here. Now. What's wrong? Travis is here and he's running his mouth about you. Bad. I was at the gym in 15 minutes. Rico met me at the door, his face grim. He's in the main room, holding court with some of the younger guys. Been drinking before he got here, I think. Real loud, real obnoxious. I could hear Travis before I saw him, his voice carrying across the gym floor like fingernails on a chalkboard. So I tell her, baby, you deserve better than some warehouse rat who can't even afford to take you somewhere nice. And she's eating it up, you know? These suburban wives, they're all the same. Desperate for a real man to show them what they're missing. Several younger guys were gathered around him, laughing at his crude jokes and egging him on. I recognized the type wannabe tough guys who lived vicariously through someone else's supposed conquests. What about her husband? One of them asked. Travis snorted. What about him? Dude's a complete loser. Works in some warehouse, drives a piece of crap truck, probably never thrown a punch in his life. She's embarrassed to be seen with him. Doesn't he suspect anything? Are you kidding? This guy's so clueless I could probably screw his wife in his own bed, and he'd thank me for keeping her company. The group erupted in laughter. Besides, even if he did figure it out, what's he gonna do? Challenge me to a forklift race? That's when I decided to make my presence known. I walked into the main room, my work boots echoing on the concrete floor. The laughter died as the younger guys noticed me approaching, but Travis was too caught up in his performance to pay attention. The best part is, he continued, she's already talking about divorce. Her lawyer friend's got it all planned out. She'll take him for half of whatever pathetic savings he's got, plus alimony. Then we can be together without her having to pretend she's not embarrassed by... Embarrassed by what? Travis spun around, his face going pale as he realized I was standing right behind him. The gym had gone completely quiet, everyone watching to see what would happen next. Oh, hey there, Travis said, trying to recover his composure. Dave, right? Rebecca's husband? That's right, and you're Travis. Rebecca's mentioned you. Has she? His confidence was returning, probably because he was surrounded by his audience. All good things, I hope. Actually, she said you were just some security guard she barely knew. Funny how stories change. A few of the guys snickered, and Travis's face flushed red. Well, you know how it is. People don't always tell the whole truth about their relationships. No, they don't. I stepped closer, close enough that he had to crane his neck slightly to look up at me. Despite his gym-sculpted physique, I had 3 inches and 20 pounds on him. For instance, I bet you didn't tell these guys that you've been sneaking around with another man's wife like a coward. Hey, now. Or that you're so insecure about your own masculinity that you have to brag about your conquests to a bunch of kids who are young enough to be impressed by your BS. The younger guys were backing away now, sensing that this was about to escalate beyond entertainment. Travis puffed out his chest, trying to look intimidating. You got something to say to me, warehouse boy? Actually, I do. I smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. I'm curious about something. You seem to think you're a real tough guy, talking big when you think nobody's listening, so here's your chance to prove it. What are you talking about? I gestured toward the boxing ring in the center of the gym. 3 rounds, gloves, mouthguards, the whole thing. You and me, right here, right now. Travis looked around nervously. The entire gym was watching now, including Rico, who was trying hard not to grin. I don't need to prove anything to you, Travis said, but his voice lacked conviction. Really? Because 5 minutes ago you were telling everyone how I'd never thrown a punch in my life. Seems like this would be easy money for a tough guy like you. The trap was perfect, and we both knew it. If he backed down, he'd look like a coward in front of everyone. If he accepted, well, Travis had no idea what he was getting into. What he didn't know was that I'd been boxing since I was 12 years old, first in the same gym where Rico had trained, later with private coaches who'd taught me techniques that most amateur fighters never learned. I'd kept it up even after the money started rolling in, partly for fitness and partly because there was something pure about the sport that appealed to me. Fine, Travis said finally, but when I'm done with you, don't come crying about it. Rico stepped forward, his expression serious. All right, gentlemen, if we're doing this, we're doing it right. 3 2-minute rounds, 1-minute breaks. I'm the referee, and my word is final. Anyone who doesn't like those rules can leave now. Nobody left. 10 minutes later, we were in the ring. Travis looked confident in his red shorts and matching gloves, playing to the crowd that had gathered. I wore simple black shorts and gloves, ignoring the spectators completely. Touch gloves and come out fighting, Rico called. Travis came at me immediately, throwing wild haymakers that looked impressive but telegraphed their intentions from a mile away. I slipped his first punch, ducked under his second, and landed a sharp jab to his nose that made his eyes water. He backed off, surprised, then came forward again with more caution. This time he tried to box properly, but his technique was sloppy and his footwork was terrible. I let him throw a few more punches, getting a feel for his rhythm, then started to work. A left hook to the body doubled him over. An uppercut snapped his head back. A combination to the head and body sent him stumbling backward into the ropes. The first round ended with Travis breathing hard and me barely warmed up. You all right? Rico asked Travis during the break. You can stop this any time. Travis shook his head, pride overriding common sense. I'm fine, just getting started. The second round was worse for him. I systematically picked him apart, landing clean shots while making him miss by inches. By the time Rico called time, Travis's nose was injured, and his left eye was starting to swell. Last chance, Rico told him. No shame in stopping now. But Travis was too proud and too stupid to quit. The third round lasted 30 seconds. I caught him with a straight right hand that dropped him to one knee, then waited while Rico counted him out. The gym erupted in cheers and applause, but I wasn't done yet. I helped Travis to his feet and pulled him close enough that only he could hear what I said next. Here's what's going to happen, I whispered. You're going to stay away from my wife. You're going to find a new gym. And if I ever hear you talking about her again, what just happened here will seem like a love tap compared to what comes next. Travis nodded weakly, a red streak still trickling from his nose. I stepped back and addressed the crowd in a normal voice. Good fight, Travis. Thanks for the workout. Then I climbed out of the ring, collected my things, and headed for the door. Behind me, I could hear Rico helping Travis to his feet and offering him ice for his injuries. But as I reached the exit, I heard something that made me pause. One of the younger fighters was talking to his friend. Holy crap, did you see that? Dave completely destroyed him. I know, right? Where'd a warehouse guy learn to fight like that? Dude, I don't think Dave's just a warehouse guy. Did you see those combinations? That's professional level stuff. I smiled and walked out into the evening air. Phase 1 was complete. Travis had been humiliated and warned off, and word would spread quickly through the local community about what had happened. But this was just the beginning. Rebecca and Maya thought they were playing a game they could win. They had no idea that they'd just provoked someone who'd built an empire by always being 3 moves ahead of his opponents. It was time to show them what real strategy looked like. The confrontation at the gym had the desired effect. Travis stopped showing up at Rico's place, and according to my surveillance team, his meetings with Rebecca became less frequent and more nervous. But instead of ending the affair, they'd simply become more careful about it. That was fine by me. I wanted them to feel secure enough to keep making mistakes. Meanwhile, I'd been busy setting up the next phase of my plan. It was time to start revealing who I really was, but I needed to do it in a way that would have maximum impact. The opportunity came sooner than I'd expected. Rebecca announced on a Thursday evening that Morrison & Associates was hosting their annual client appreciation dinner the following week, and spouses were invited. "It's a pretty big deal," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. "All the major clients will be there, plus the senior partners. I really need to make a good impression." "Of course," I replied. "What's the dress code?" "Cocktail attire. You'll need a suit." She said it like she doubted I owned one, which was understandable given the role I'd been playing. What she didn't know was that I had a closet full of suits that cost more than most people's cars. I think I can manage that. The dinner was held at the Riverside Country Club, the same place where Rebecca's family maintained their membership, and where I'd been subtly snubbed at various social functions over the years. The irony wasn't lost on me that this would be the venue for the beginning of their downfall. I arrived separately from Rebecca, claiming I had to work late. In reality, I'd spent the afternoon in preparation getting a haircut from the city's most expensive barber, putting on a custom-tailored Armani suit, and making sure every detail was perfect. When I walked into the club's main ballroom, the transformation was complete. Gone was the humble warehouse worker in work boots and flannel shirts. In his place stood someone who looked like he belonged in boardrooms and country clubs. I spotted Rebecca across the room, talking with a group of her colleagues. She was wearing a black cocktail dress that I'd never seen before, probably bought for the occasion with money from our joint account that she thought I didn't monitor. Travis was there too, working security for the event, trying to look professional in an ill-fitting rental tux. The bruises from our boxing match had faded, but I could see the wariness in his eyes as he scanned the room. I made my way over to Rebecca's group, moving with the confidence of someone who'd attended 1,000 similar events. "Sorry I'm late," I said, placing a hand on Rebecca's lower back. She turned and her eyes went wide with shock. For a moment, she didn't even recognize me. "David," she whispered, "the one and only." I smiled at her colleagues, extending my hand to the nearest one. "David Sullivan. You must be Rebecca's coworkers." They introduced themselves. Junior associates, account managers, the usual mix of ambitious professionals trying to climb the corporate ladder. But their attention wasn't on the introductions. They were staring at me with the kind of interest that expensive clothes and confident bearing tend to generate. "I have to say," said Jennifer Walsh, one of the senior account managers, "Rebecca never mentioned how handsome her husband was." Rebecca forced a laugh. "David cleans up well." "What do you do, David?" asked another colleague. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. "I'm in technology, data security specifically." It wasn't a lie, just an incomplete truth. "Oh, that's interesting," Jennifer said. "We work with several tech companies. Maybe you know some of them." "It's possible. The industry's smaller than people think." We chatted for a few more minutes about technology trends and cybersecurity challenges. I kept my responses vague but knowledgeable, letting them draw their own conclusions about my level of expertise. Then Maya Chen appeared at Rebecca's elbow. "Rebecca, darling, there you are." Maya's smile was perfectly crafted, but her eyes were calculating as she looked me up and down. "And this must be the famous David." "Maya," I replied with a smile of my own. "Rebecca's told me so much about you." "Has she? All good things, I hope." "She mentioned you're a lawyer, corporate law, if I remember correctly." "That's right. And you're in warehouses, wasn't it?" She said it with just enough emphasis to make it clear she was trying to embarrass me in front of Rebecca's colleagues. But I'd been expecting this. "Among other things," I replied smoothly. "I find it's important to understand every aspect of a business, from the ground up." Before Maya could respond, there was a commotion near the entrance. The country club's general manager was greeting someone with the kind of deference usually reserved for visiting dignitaries. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced over the sound system, "we're honored to have a very special guest with us tonight." Please join me in welcoming the CEO of Dataflow Industries." The room went quiet. Dataflow Industries was the tech company that had been making headlines for months, the mysterious billion-dollar corporation that had just landed the largest government contract in cybersecurity history. I felt Rebecca tense beside me as all eyes turned toward the entrance. Maya's expression sharpened with interest. Even Travis, standing near the back of the room, craned his neck to get a better look. "I understand," the general manager continued, "that this is the first time the CEO has made a public appearance. A real exclusive for our guests tonight." The crowd began to murmur with excitement. Dataflow's CEO was like a mythical figure in the business world, enormously successful but completely anonymous. Everyone wanted to know who had built such an empire while maintaining absolute secrecy. I checked my watch. Perfect timing. "If you'll excuse me," I said to the group, "I need to step outside for a moment. Work call." Rebecca barely acknowledged me, too caught up in the excitement of potentially meeting a real billionaire. Maya was already positioning herself for an introduction, no doubt thinking about the potential legal fees such a client might generate. I walked calmly toward the entrance, nodding to the general manager as I passed. He smiled and handed me a wireless microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, my voice carrying clearly through the sound system. The room fell silent as everyone turned to look at me. I could see Rebecca's face in the crowd, her expression shifting from confusion to dawning realization. "Thank you for the warm welcome. For those who don't know me, my name is David Sullivan, and I am indeed the CEO of Dataflow Industries." The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity. Then the room erupted in shocked murmurs and excited chatter. Rebecca looked like she'd been struck by lightning. Maya's carefully composed expression had cracked completely. Across the room, Travis was staring at me with his mouth hanging open. "I know this comes as a surprise to many of you," I continued, "especially to my wife Rebecca, who's been patiently waiting for me to make something of myself for the past 5 years." A few people laughed nervously. Rebecca's face had gone completely white. "The truth is, I've been working undercover in my own warehouse, learning the business from every angle and staying connected to the real world that many CEOs lose touch with. It's been an invaluable experience and one that's taught me a great deal about loyalty, honesty, and the true character of the people in my life." I paused, letting my eyes sweep across the room until they found Rebecca's. "Unfortunately, it's also taught me some painful lessons about betrayal and deception. But that's a story for another time." I handed the microphone back to the general manager and walked toward the exit, leaving behind a room full of stunned guests and one very shocked wife. Outside in the parking lot, I loosened my tie and took a deep breath of cool evening air. Phase 2 was complete. By tomorrow morning, everyone in Rebecca's professional and social circles would know exactly who I was and what I was worth. More importantly, they'd all be wondering why the CEO of a billion-dollar company was making cryptic comments about betrayal and deception at a public event. The speculation and gossip would be delicious, and it was only the beginning. My phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Rico. "Saw the news coverage on TV. Holy crap, Hermano, you really are full of surprises." I smiled and typed back, "You haven't seen anything yet." Then I got in my truck, the same beat-up Ford I'd been driving for 5 years, and headed home to wait for Rebecca's return. This was going to be a very interesting conversation. Rebecca didn't come home that night. I sat in our living room until 3 in the morning, still wearing my Armani suit, waiting for her to walk through the door with some explanation for where she'd been. But the house remained empty, except for the sound of my own breathing and the tick of the antique clock on the mantelpiece. At dawn, I finally went upstairs and changed into jeans and a t-shirt. The expensive suit went back into the closet where it had been hanging, unworn, for months. But the transformation wasn't something I could put away as easily. The cat was out of the bag now, and there was no going back to the simple life of David Sullivan, warehouse worker. My phone had been buzzing constantly since the dinner reporters wanting interviews, business associates wondering why I'd kept my identity secret, and a few messages from people I hadn't heard from in years. I ignored most of them, but one caught my attention. It was from Maya Chen, sent at 2:47 a.m. "We need to talk," I almost laughed. Maya thought she could salvage her position, maybe even turn this revelation to her advantage. She had no idea what was coming. At 8 o'clock, Rebecca finally walked through the front door. She looked like she hadn't slept, her makeup smeared and her dress wrinkled. She'd obviously spent the night somewhere else, probably at Maya's apartment, planning their next move. "Hello, Rebecca." She jumped slightly, not having noticed me sitting at the kitchen table with my morning coffee. "David, we need to talk." "I imagine we do." "Coffee?" She shook her head, then seemed to think better of it. "Actually, yes, please." I poured her a cup from the pot I'd made earlier, noting that my hands were perfectly steady. Amazing how calm you could feel when you'd been planning for this moment for weeks. "So," I said, settling back into my chair, "how was the rest of the party?" Rebecca wrapped her hands around the coffee mug like it was an anchor. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Tell you what?" "Don't play games, David. You know what I mean. Why didn't you tell me who you really were?" I considered the question seriously. Would it have mattered? Of course it would have mattered. Do you have any idea what this means? What you've put me through? What I've put you through? I raised an eyebrow. That's interesting phrasing. She had the grace to look uncomfortable. And that's not what I meant. Isn't it? Because from where I'm sitting, it seems like you're more upset about being embarrassed in front of your colleagues than you are about discovering your husband isn't who you thought he was. That's not fair. Fair? I leaned forward. Rebecca, let me ask you something. If I had told you 5 years ago that I was worth more money than you could spend in 10 lifetimes, would you have married me for love or for money? She opened her mouth to answer, then closed it again. That's what I thought. I wanted someone who would love me for who I was, not what I could buy them. I thought I'd found that with you. You did find that with me. Did I? Because the woman I fell in love with wouldn't have spent the last 6 months sneaking around with a security guard because she was embarrassed by her husband's job. The color drained from her face. How did you know about Travis? I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Rebecca, I've built a billion-dollar empire by paying attention to details. Did you really think I wouldn't notice when my wife started having an affair? She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see the calculations running behind her eyes. Deny everything? Confess and ask for forgiveness? Try to turn this around somehow? Finally, she chose honesty. Or at least partial honesty. It wasn't supposed to happen, she said quietly. It just did. Things like that don't just happen, Rebecca. They're choices. A series of choices that led you to betray everything we built together. What we built? Her voice rose slightly. David, we lived like we were barely middle class. I drove a 3-year-old car and shopped at Target while you were secretly worth billions. And that made it okay to cheat on me? No, but God, David, do you know what it was like? Going to family dinners where everyone looked down on us? Having my sister make jokes about your job? Feeling like I had to apologize for my life every time I saw my friends? So you decided to upgrade to someone who made you feel better about yourself? She flinched. It wasn't like that. What was it like? Travis made me feel desired, appreciated, like I was worth something. And I didn't? You were always so distant, so secretive. How was I supposed to know you cared when you never shared anything real with me? It was a fair point, and it stung because there was truth in it. I had been distant, keeping the most important part of my life hidden from her. But that didn't excuse what she'd done. So, instead of talking to me about it, you decided to have an affair. I didn't plan it. It just happened gradually. Travis was there. He listened to me. He made me feel special. Special enough to plan a divorce with Maya so you could take half my money and run off with him? Her face went white again. How do you know about that? The same way I know about the motel on Route 9, the credit card receipts from restaurants I've never been to. And the fact that you told Travis I was a pathetic loser who would never amount to anything. Rebecca put her head in her hands. David, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I made a mistake, a huge mistake, but it's over now. Travis and I were done. I ended it last night after the dinner. Really? Just like that? Yes. When I realized who you really were, what I'd been throwing away. David, can we fix this? Can we start over? I studied her face, looking for some sign of genuine remorse or love. What I saw instead was calculation. She wasn't sorry she'd had the affair. She was sorry she'd been caught. And now that she knew what I was worth, she wanted to salvage the marriage for financial reasons. Tell me something, Rebecca. If I were still just a warehouse worker, would you be sitting here asking for a second chance? She hesitated for just a moment too long. Of course I would. I don't believe you. David, please. I love you. I've always loved you. No, you haven't. You loved the idea of me, maybe. The potential you thought you saw, but you never loved the real me because you never bothered to find out who that was. I stood up and walked to the kitchen window, looking out at the modest backyard of our modest house in our modest neighborhood. Soon, none of this would matter anymore. What happens now? Rebecca asked quietly. I turned back to face her. Now you get what you wanted all along. Freedom from your embarrassing husband. I don't want a divorce, David. Not now. Not after everything we've been through. Everything we've been through? Rebecca, we haven't been through anything together. For the past 6 months, you've been living a completely separate life with another man. The only thing we've been through is the slow death of our marriage. But now that you know I know the truth about you, things can be different. We can be different. You're right. Things will be different, but not in the way you're hoping. I walked past her toward the stairs. I'm going to pack a few things and stay somewhere else for a while. You should call Maya and tell her the divorce is back on. But this time, it's my idea. David, wait! I paused at the bottom of the stairs and looked back at her. She was crying now, but they looked like tears of frustration rather than genuine sorrow. For what it's worth, I said. I really did love you, the woman I thought you were anyway. It's a shame she never really existed. Then I went upstairs to pack, leaving my wife alone in the kitchen with her coffee and her regrets. But I wasn't done with Rebecca and Travis and Maya. Not by a long shot. The real revenge was just beginning. 3 months later, I sat in the penthouse office of Dataflow Industries, looking out over the city where I'd spent 5 years pretending to be someone else. The divorce papers were signed, the settlement was finalized, and Rebecca was about to discover that being married to a billionaire and being divorced from one were two very different things. My assistant knocked and entered. Mr. Sullivan, your 3 o'clock is here. Send them in. Rebecca walked into my office, followed by Maya Chen. Both women looked nervous, which was exactly how I wanted them to feel. David, Rebecca said, forcing a smile. Thank you for seeing us. Of course. Please, sit down. They settled into the leather chairs across from my desk. Rebecca was wearing a designer outfit that she'd bought with her divorce settlement money, while Maya carried herself with the confidence of someone who thought she was about to close a major deal. I assume this is about the non-disclosure agreement, I said. Maya leaned forward. David, we think the terms you're proposing are unnecessarily restrictive. Rebecca simply wants to move on with her life. I'm sure she does, but part of moving on means accepting the consequences of her choices. What consequences? Rebecca asked. The divorce is final. You got your revenge. I almost smiled. They had no idea what revenge actually looked like. Rebecca, do you remember what you said to Travis about me? About how I was a pathetic loser who would never amount to anything? She shifted uncomfortably in her chair. David, I was angry and confused. I said things I didn't mean. Did you mean it when you told him you were embarrassed to be married to me? That's not... Did you mean it when you planned to take half my assets in the divorce and run off with him? Maya interrupted. David, this is counterproductive. We're here to discuss the NDA, not relitigate the past. I turned my attention to her. Maya, do you remember applying for a job here 5 years ago? Her confident expression faltered slightly. I'm not sure what that has to do with anything. You accused me of discrimination when I didn't hire you, threatened a lawsuit, called me a small-minded nobody who would never build anything significant. That was business, David. Nothing personal. Everything is personal, Maya. Especially when you spend months coaching my wife through an affair and a divorce strategy designed to maximize her financial gain. Both women were looking distinctly uncomfortable now. Here's what's going to happen, I continued. Rebecca, you're going to sign the NDA as written, which means you'll never discuss our marriage, my business, or anything else about me in public. In exchange, you'll keep the settlement money. And if I don't sign? Then I'll invoke the morality clause in our prenuptial agreement, which means you forfeit the settlement and leave with nothing. Rebecca's face went white. What prenuptial agreement? We never signed a prenuptial agreement. I opened a folder on my desk and slid a document across to her. Actually, we did. It was buried in the paperwork when we bought the house. You signed it without reading it, which is unfortunate but legally binding. Maya snatched the document and began reading quickly. Her face grew paler with each paragraph. This is ironclad, she whispered. Yes, it is. I had some very good lawyers draft it. "You son of a witch," Rebecca said, her composure finally cracking. "You planned this from the beginning." "No, Rebecca. I planned for the possibility that the woman I married might not be who she claimed to be. Turns out I was right to be cautious." "So what now?" Maya asked. "You destroy Rebecca financially and call it justice?" "I'm not destroying anyone. Rebecca made her choices, and now she gets to live with the consequences. She can sign the NDA, keep the money, and disappear from my life forever. Or she can refuse, lose everything, and still disappear from my life forever. Either way, I win." Rebecca was crying now, but they were tears of rage rather than sorrow. "You're not the man I married." "You're right. The man you married was a fiction. A character I created to test whether you could love someone for who they were rather than what they had. You failed that test spectacularly." I stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the city below. "There's one more thing you should know. Travis has been having financial difficulties lately." "What do you mean?" Rebecca asked. "Well, it turns out that bragging about your affairs in public can have consequences. Someone I have no idea who just sent recordings of his gym conversations to his employer. Apparently, they didn't appreciate having a security guard who boasted about seducing clients' wives." Maya's eyes widened. "You got him fired." "I didn't do anything." Travis got himself fired by being indiscreet, but the consequences didn't stop there. His landlord somehow learned about his activities and decided he wasn't the kind of tenant they wanted. His credit rating mysteriously took a hit. His car was repossessed. "You destroyed his life," Rebecca whispered. "I destroyed nothing. I simply made sure that the right people knew who Travis really was. The rest was inevitable." "Where is he now?" "Last I heard, he'd moved back in with his mother in Ohio. Apparently, the stress of unemployment and financial ruin wasn't good for his confidence with married women." I turned back to face them. "The point is, actions have consequences. Travis learned that lesson. Now it's your turn." Rebecca stared at me with a mixture of hatred and fear. "I don't even know who you are anymore." "I'm the same person I always was, Rebecca. The only difference is that now you know what happens when you betray someone who has the resources to respond appropriately." Maya was already gathering her papers. "We'll need time to review this. Take all the time you need, but understand that the offer expires at the end of the week. After that, the morality clause goes into effect automatically." They left without another word, Rebecca's sobs echoing in the hallway outside my office. I returned to my desk and opened another folder, this one containing the final piece of my revenge. Maya Chen thought she was safe because she was just the lawyer, not the unfaithful wife. She was about to learn otherwise. My assistant's voice came through the intercom. "Mr. Sullivan, I have the senior partners from Chen's law firm on line 1. I picked up the phone. "Gentlemen, thank you for taking my call. I believe we have some mutual concerns about one of your associates." 20 minutes later, I hung up with the satisfaction of knowing that Maya's career was about to take a very dramatic turn for the worse. It seemed that her law firm took a dim view of associates who used confidential client information for personal vendettas. By the end of the week, Rebecca had signed the NDA and disappeared from the city with her settlement money. Maya had been disbarred and was facing a malpractice lawsuit that would consume whatever assets she had left. Travis was still living with his mother in Ohio, working at a hardware store and keeping his mouth shut about other people's wives. As for me, I was finally free to be myself again. No more pretending to be someone I wasn't, no more hiding my success, no more wondering if the people in my life cared about me or my money. I'd learned some valuable lessons about trust, loyalty, and the true nature of the people we choose to love. They were expensive lessons, but they were worth every penny. 6 months later, I was having dinner at Rico's gym, sharing pizza with the guys after a particularly brutal sparring session. These were real friends, people who'd known me when I had nothing and stuck by me when I had everything. "So, what's next for the mysterious billionaire?" Pete asked, grinning as he reached for another slice. "Same thing as always," I replied. "Work hard, stay humble, and try not to let success go to my head. And maybe find a nice girl who likes you for your charming personality," Rico added. "Maybe, but next time I'm going to be a lot more careful about who I trust." "Smart man," Maria said. "Trust is earned, not given." I raised my beer in a toast. To real friends and hard-earned lessons. They raised their drinks in response, and for the first time in years, I felt completely at peace with who I was and where I belonged. Rebecca had wanted to be married to a successful man, but she'd never wanted to be married to me. Travis had wanted to steal another man's wife, but he'd picked the wrong target. Maya had wanted revenge for an old slight, but she'd chosen the wrong enemy. In the end, they'd all gotten exactly what they deserved. And I'd gotten something even more valuable. The knowledge that I was better off without people who couldn't see past the surface to the person underneath. It had taken 5 years of living a lie to learn that truth, but some truths are worth waiting for.